Well, I guess we'll go ahead and maybe get started. It's 12:01 and then people can kind of trickle in as they arrive. So, hello everyone. My name is Kylie Stultz, and on behalf of the ICA Pedagogy Committee, I would like to welcome you to today's Lunch and Learn. The theme for today is what stumps you about the clarinet. And joining us to discuss this topic is Dr. Kimberly Cole-Luevano. So I'm just going to read a short bio about her so we can learn a little bit more. So Dr. Kimberly Cole-Luevano has established herself as a formidable soloist and chamber musician. She is currently professor of clarinet and chair of the Division of Instrumental Studies at the University of North Texas. She was a member of the clarinet faculty at the Interlochen Arts Camp from 2003 to 2012 and has performed at the International Clarinet Association's ClarinetFest on numerous occasions. Dr. Luevano has several recordings, some of which are Bright Angel from 2013, Atonement from 2015, and TrioPolis One from 2017. She has studied with Keith Lemmons, Deplus, Alain Damiens, Elsa Ludewig-Verdehr, and James Gillespie. So welcome, Dr. Luevano. Thank you for joining us today. We're so excited to have you here.
It's great to be here, and it's great to see so many friends. And I'm going to do a disclaimer that I'm not the expert, and especially I see a lot of friends and colleagues on the call. So I hope this can maybe be as much of a seminar or a discussion on things that on solutions for each other. So here we are. Let's go. You have questions already? We got questions already, right, Kylie?
Yeah, we have some questions already. So the way we'll kind of structure today is just type any questions you have in the chat. We've got about 45 minutes, so we're going to do our best to get to as many of them as possible. So I'll just go ahead and start off with a question that I have prepared. So the first question is, how do you navigate an embouchure change on undergraduate students, and about how long do you think it takes for this embouchure change to kind of go into effect? About how many, weeks or months do you kind of allow for the student to make that change? And how do you do that when they have a busy schedule and are playing a lot in undergrad?
Yeah, thanks for that question. And I actually have pretty clear ideas about this. And thanks for asking that question also, because I actually feel like I know the answer I have an answer for this one. And that is, well, I would say from my experience, it's not just undergrads, it's master's students and it's doctoral, I would have to, one of my students is here so she can say the truth to actually, I don't think we did much with Meg, but I found the easiest way to do it is to just kind of separate it from the clarinet entirely and just go back. Strangely enough, even doctoral students will come and they just don't understand what muscles are actually involved. And so we kind of get rid of the clarinet and we go back and just go through a whole anatomy discussion, like what's the purpose of the jaws? And to explain that the jaws actually, a lot of clarinetists, myself included, got confused over the years about biting, right? Because I had learned growing up, don't bite. But in fact, you actually do have to bite, because if you don't have enough jaw pressure at all, then that's bad too, right? So I have a skeleton in my office actually in a jaw. So we kind of go back and here's the jaw, and you actually do need pressure on the reed. So it's a matter of finding, like, you control the bite, right? So we go back, okay, and we go through, okay, this is the jaws. This is how much space you need between the jaws. The Marcellus kind of description of I don't know that you all know this, but I didn't study with him. So it's just about talking to people that study, but he would describe it like a triangle, whereby you would have a point for your cheekbone and a point for your cheekbone and a point for your chin. So we get that going. And then we talk about the amount of the mouthpiece, right? That needs to be in the mouth so that you're on the fulcrum of the reed. And then we talk about, I show a picture of the muscle structure of the face. I always confuse it, but it's either the orbicularis oris or the oris orbicularis. And you wouldn't believe how many students have never, they don't understand that this is a circle. And they think there's like the chin and the upper lip, which I get because that was me too. So I try to just explain and give all the parts first. Like, here's what's actually going on. Here's what you actually need to do. What you're really doing is wedging the mouthpiece and then your lips are holding. So then we talk through that. And then so then we go to the mirror. I have a big mirror in my office and we're like, okay, show me your embouchure face. And I really just have that. And this is actually interesting too, because some students can make their embouchure face here. I'll go like really easily. And some have never thought about that. They can't make their embouchure without their clarinet to save their life. Like they can't, like they have to get their mouthpiece here. And I'm like, no. We have to do this without your clarinet. So we go and we just make, and sometimes it's, sometimes it's just look at mine and copy. Sometimes it's the whistle smile. I think we probably all have these strategies. We can go through those if you want. Sometimes it's the ooh, the cue, soda straw. So all the strategies we can talk about, but we all have them about getting the flat chin. And then we talk through there. Okay, so when you do this, now your chin is flat and you have divots. Now your corners are in, not out, right? And we kind of just do, now you're engaging your upper lip, and we know if you're engaging your upper lip because your nostrils are flaring. Okay, now let's just hold that for a minute. And so we really do, like we go to the mirror and I put my timer on my phone, a minute, hold. And I usually talk at them while they're at it. Okay, your chin is, because I can hold, I've been doing this a long time. We can all hold our embouchure pretty well. But you're like, oh, look, you're losing your divots. Okay, feel that it's there, feel that it's there, feel. And I try and have them touch their face a lot just to build awareness, because we know students are wired in all ways, right? Some are audio, some are like kinesthetic, so I try to get them engaged on a lot of levels to just fix that. So we hold it for a minute, then we do the QT, stretch it out, and then we do it again for another minute. And the goal of that is to try and get it that when I'm like, put your embouchure face on there, like, and they put it on. And then the next step is we would take a straw. Okay, now we're gonna make your embouchure and you're gonna insert the straw in, and we're gonna hold the straw for a minute. And then we do that. And then we step to, okay, now you're gonna make your embouchure and you're gonna slide your mouthpiece in, but we're not gonna do anything. We're just gonna, and we're gonna make sure when you slide your mouthpiece in, and I do it, that I do embouchure open, and then I have them click their mouthpiece against their teeth. Okay, now you're just gonna hug your mouthpiece with your lips, and we're just gonna do that. And now we're gonna do that, and we're gonna blow through the mouthpiece, but we're not gonna make any sound. We're just gonna make air, and we're not gonna change. And then we add sound on in the end. So how long it takes, actually, I would say it doesn't take as long as you would think it takes. Like I would say most students, if you start a brand new student, and this could be a student that never had a teacher, never did anything about embouchure, in a way, they're the easier ones, right? Because they didn't have something they thought was right that you have to correct. But they can be 2 weeks down, right? And I think the key is that you have them not do it with their clarinet. You'd say, okay, take your pencil, take your straw, keep it with you 24/7. And when you're walking to class, make your embouchure. And when you're in the bathroom in the morning, make your embouchure. And when you're going to bed at night, you make your embouchure, so that they just get used to that. And then actually I say, and when you're playing your clarinet, I really don't care what's going on. Just like the goal for me is just make your embouchure all the time as much as possible. Don't think about it when you're playing clarinet, because there's too much else to think about when you're playing clarinet. And it goes quick, pretty quick. Like, yeah, that depends on the student. I had a student who shall remain nameless who has a very, very good job now. And it literally took this kid, this was many, many years ago when I still taught in Michigan. He couldn't even make his embouchure face for like a month. He would come in and I'd be like, okay, here we go again. We're going to make your embouchure face. And it just took, humans are all different ways. So that's fine. They'll get it eventually, but you have to, you have to be willing to take as much lesson time as it takes to be like, okay, now we're going to work on your embouchure. And they'll be like, oh man, I don't know, like, sorry, we got to do it. But it goes fast. It really, really does. What questions or observations does everybody have? Or do you use those steps or thoughts? Ricardo was nodding. I think we have a similar, background.
Great. And one of my favorite, go ahead.
Yeah, sometimes I start with double lip, depending on if it's biting too much. So if they bite with double lip, it hurts. So it takes a little bit of the pressure, and they feel, and when they're okay, back to single lip.
And that's the other thing too. If you just have them do it with the straw, then you can tell a lot of stuff by the straw or the pencil. Like if the straw's out here, then they probably don't have enough space between their jaws, right? So like, okay, let's make more space between your jaws until the pencil is down. And you can do double lip too. Or then if you use the bigger straws, like a boba tea straw, then if they can kind of tell if they're squishing the straw or not too. So it's like we said, we do need to control the bite, but that the use of a bigger straw helps develop some sensitivity as to how little or how much you can change your jaw pressure, and it'll affect the straw, right? So that sort of helps too.
Great.
I think that's, yeah. Oh, that's the other thing I came upon pretty recently is when I make my embouchure, like some kids will get like this, you know, they'll go like, it'll be out here like this. And I'm like, no, that has to be mouthpiece sized, right?
Right.
And that's within the last 2 years. That's what's great about teaching, right? You get better and better at doing it. And I'm like, no, it has to be mouthpiece sized because you have to make your lips be able to hold and hug on that mouthpiece.
Right.
So it's out here. And that, like, then they're like, oh, and then it's funny how just telling them that they self-fix. They're like, oh, actually, Megan, you were a mouthpiece sized girl. I was like, no, Megan, it has to be mouthpiece sized. You got to get it in. And it was like, oh, right, I got it. So, yeah.
I think Larry Guy calls that the smile embouchure if it's too wide. If you book embouchure building for clarinet is so great.
That's a great book.
One of my
The other thing that I'm starting to do, I did it more before COVID, is actually if I'm playing, I'll have them, and you have to be okay with this. I'm okay because I have kids and I've been teaching a long time. So it's the students you have to be careful about because you want to make sure, but I'll have them, I'm like, oh my God, I'm sure. And I'll have them come poke my face. So they actually, and then I'll go like here, if my corners are not structured out here, they're all the way in here. And so I do that less now because of COVID kind of really messed that up, but I'm starting to get back to it. And again, it's a comfort level. You'll have to know your comfort zone and your student's comfort zone. But they can also poke you with like a pencil if I have a student that's a little shy about that, which would be understandable because it's a little personal. But then they can poke you, right? And then you can kind of show them with your own face, like, no, yes, no, yes. And I learned from a saxophone player, a really good trick is if you tell them the amount of space between the molars, if you have them think about having a blueberry back there, a really fat blueberry, and they have to hold it without squishing. So sometimes if I actually find the right kind of blueberries at the store, I'll go and I'll bring them in, like just for fun. Because that's the same thing. It doesn't take very much pressure before it totally squishes. So that's a nice tool. And it could be baby carrots. My friend Suzanne Turk told me one time about baby carrots. And I tried that too, but those are a little big. It has to be the right size baby carrot. But blueberries are that's a pretty good the fat ones though, the fat blueberries.
Yeah, awesome.
So
great.
I guess a cranberry would work, something that people have to hold back there that they'll squish if it gets too much pressure going on.
Cool. Well, we do have some questions coming in, so maybe I'll transition to one of those. So let's see. First one, whenever I play, especially for longer periods of time, my front lower two teeth hurt a lot, and sometimes it feels like I am pushing too hard on them.
Yeah.
Any suggestions to help with this? Is there something with my embouchure I could change?
Okay. I think I've had this myself before I would say, actually, I think it's a mouthpiece thing. And I think it relates to first of all, I think if that's happening, that's a bad thing. And when that was happening to me, I went to my dentist. My teeth actually started to move. And my dentist was like, you can't, so there's no amount of pain or like, that's bad. That's all bad. So I would say probably it means that the mouthpiece spacing is probably not aligned well with whatever your ergonomic situation is. Okay. So I would say it probably means that there's a tip opening and too long of a facing. And so that it's necessary to have that much amount of bite to control the mouthpiece. The problem is, this was my problem, is I was a biter forever and ever and ever. And so it's a chicken and egg phenomena, right? It's like you learn to sound good on that. So you learn to put a lot of jaw pressure. So then you put harder reeds on. And at some point you just have to stop. So when I had to stop this, I had to change mouthpieces. And I actually went to just an M13 lyre mouthpiece, or like a D'Addario XO or X5, something just like straight down the line, like sort of medium close, medium tip opening, and actually go to double lip for that very reason, because then those mouthpieces are a little easier to control. In double lip, as Ricardo says, you can tell pretty quickly when you're using too much jaw pressure in those mouthpieces, and you have to do a little softer reed. but I would encourage, I don't think that's a bad thing I don't think it's a bad thing. Well, what's bad about it to me is it's not sustainable. Like if your teeth are hurting, then at some point I feel like any time there's pain or something hurts about the clarinet, it's a problem because it's not sustainable and you're not using your body in the way that it's going to produce sound optimally. So in this case, if this were my student, I would be like, okay, in this sense, I've had students like this. And this also, when I say jaw pain, that's the same thing. Sometimes longer facing requires students to hook their jaw forward to control the mouthpiece. And then, so they have to bite, right? Like they have to use more bite than is appropriate for their head structure, right? So I would go back to, like I said, an M13, maybe an M15, maybe an XO, just stock mouthpiece, straight down the line, softer reed, and just get used to making the embouchure and making the sound with less jaw pressure and realizing that you can do that with air and with lips and with voicing, and you don't need the jaws to you need a controlled bite, right? But you have to learn how to change that jaw bite pressure so you don't cause permanent damage, right? That one's a little longer of a haul than an embouchure change because it's a whole sound production thing too. I feel like that's a little bit harder. Double lip can be a little bit hard, but sometimes I've had students, I wouldn't shy away from it, y'all, because sometimes I have students, like, I'll just be like, oh, double lip, and it actually sounds better immediately, and they love it, and they want to run with it. So I wouldn't be shy about the double lip approach at all. Okay. And I actually practice double lip quite a lot for that same thing, just to get everything all put together.
Well, that is actually a great segue into the next question, which is, what is the biggest difference between playing single and double lip? And is there a benefit to either?
Well, I have to give credit, and Ricardo's here too, to Dr. Verdehr, to Elsa, because she was a double lip player and she learned from Harold Wright. She and Harold Wright were in the Marlboro Music Festival together. And so when we started with her, she didn't tell us that we had to play double lip, but she would just incorporate principles of double lip playing into single lip. So just not to go all the way back to the beginning, but just to make sure that all of us are on the same page. So double lip would be like as if we were treating it like the oboe, right? So then we're going to cover we're going to make cushion with our lips over both our top lips and our bottom lips, right? And we're going to play like that. So single lip then we call single lip because we're anchoring our mouthpiece against our top teeth like that, right? So when we're playing single lip, it's really the top teeth that are serving as the anchor for the mouthpiece. And then we're hugging with the lips around it. If we're going to do double lip, then we're also covering our top teeth with our lips. So it's like oboe and we slide in. Okay. I would say the benefits about double lip are, one, yes, it helps you very quickly identify appropriate bite or appropriate jaw pressure, the controlled bite. Two, generally speaking, it makes more room inside your mouth. Wait, did I see Linda Bartley's on here? I think Linda Bartley's a double lipper too. Maybe she can chime in. But anyway, so it teaches you really to develop the muscles in the face better and to use the lip muscles. It makes more room inside your mouth. It literally makes more room inside your mouth because you're taller. I find double lip is great too because you have to use the appropriate amount of air. You have to, or it's just not going to work at all. It doesn't sound good. And it really helps you to isolate what your tongue is doing to shape the sound versus what the lips are doing. So I think double lip's an amazing tool. How I would use it, and actually, like, as a personal story, so I wasn't happy when I was a doctoral student at Michigan State. Ricardo and I were there at the same time, and Elsa was on sabbatical, and I think there weren't, I don't know, but there was at some point I was like, okay, I'm just going to try this double lip thing. And I didn't understand I needed to use a softer reed. So that's my qualification now. If you're going to do double lip, use really go a strength softer of a reed to start with. But it sounded terrible at first. And I didn't have enough information of guidance because Elsa was on sabbatical. So it just sounded terrible, but little over little, I sort of figured it out, over about a month, right? And I was like, oh, wow, I really feel that I'm using these muscles more. Oh, wow, if I get my tongue into this different position, it sounds better. Oh, I really have to use more air and relax my throat. So I kind of figured it out. And so now that's why I use double lip whenever I feel like ideally it's a nice way to start every practice session, or when you're getting really tired in a rehearsal, because it kind of makes you put everything back the way it should be. Thanks for putting all these comments in.
Yeah.
So so double lip versus, did I answer that question? Did whoever asked it? And I would say, I don't think that there's a better or a worse. I think if you haven't tried double lip, I would recommend it to you wholeheartedly. I would say be comfortable with not sounding good while you get it figured out. Some people sound beautiful immediately. I've had students that they do double lip and we're like, you should just play. Oh, the other thing about double lip you have to be aware of is like you can't anchor, right? That's the other thing about double lip is it helps you figure out how much mouthpiece should be the appropriate amount of mouthpiece. But what can be hard is it's hard to get because now you don't have something firm to anchor against. So that can be a little tricky, is to figure out the angle. And I would recommend that you rest the bell on your legs to start with, right? And so then that can be tricky to find, like how to do it without getting your head down, right? But you want to rest your bell on your legs at first, because you want to make sure you're not trying to use your jaws in the same way, which is also a benefit of it, because now you're not trying to use your jaws to hold the clarinet, right? You're just holding the clarinet with your thumbs. So yeah, the Copeland, that would be really great to practice that double lip, because then you really have to get your air going and your embouchure fixed and all of that, for sure. Yeah, totally. I admire you for that. I don't know that I would want to take that on, but you're right. If you could do a double lip, man, single lip gonna be easy, right? For sure. Okay. Did we answer the double lip sufficiently to whoever asked that question? I think. If not, we'll go back. Or if for those of you who are double lippers, put stuff in the comments. All right.
Yeah.
I saw Linda put it in there. Good job. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, there's some stuff popping up. The next one, how do you prevent jaw pain?
Yeah. Okay. I think that one. Okay. I have a little bit of. My dad is a retired oral surgeon, so I kind of. I know, right? So I would talk to him about TMJ, and people say it's TMJ disease, and he goes, it's not really a disease, right? TMJ is the temporal mandibular joint. And I wish I had my skeleton here. I brought a lot of props, but if you just like feel up here, it's really where your jaw locks into your skull up there. And if you see, this is why I really recommend having skulls or anatomy props in your studio, because then you can show students exactly what's going on. And that's worth 5,000 words right there. So up here on where your jaw, like we can all feel it, go ahead. But if you just close and open your jaw, there's a ball joint, just like there is with a ball and socket with every other place. The socket is in your skull, the ball is on your jaw. So why jaw hurts is like some mouthpieces, same thing. It's about the controlled bite. And I would propose that if you have jaw pain, it's because you're either because your reeds are too hard, or because the mouthpiece facing is too open for your natural jaw setting, or your tip opening is too large for your natural setting. You are therefore having to control the sound and center the sound with jaw pressure somehow. And that could either be because you're closing your jaws, like there's a lot of pressure, that you're needing to close your jaws that much to control the mouthpiece. Or sometimes I even remember growing up having teachers say, push your jaw forward a little bit. And basically what you're doing by doing that is you're finding the focal point of, you're controlling the focal point of your reed. It's just that I think that I don't think you should ever need to put your body outside of what your body's natural thing is to play the clarinet. I think we should find equipment that works with our body, right? So if there's jaw pain, again, I would say, I hate to say this, but we would kind of investigate, like, what mouthpiece are you currently on? And usually that's going to be like, more open mouthpieces would be like And even a more open mouthpiece isn't necessarily a problem if your reed structure is in there. But I would say you can also find, rather than having to jut your jaw forward, if you take more mouthpiece in and you investigate the angles and the way that you're using your thumbs in the mouthpiece, you can simulate getting more focal point on the reed without jutting your jaw forward. Okay, so I would say it's a deeper problem than that. But I would say, again, my philosophy, and I would say it's not just my philosophy, I would go back to all my teachers, but in particular, Elsa, because she studied Alexander technique. Really, I think our clarinet is supposed to be our voice. And if we have to manipulate our body to make that voice, that's bad. There should never be pain about the clarinet. If there's pain, you can find, especially in this day and age, you can find so much different equipment. You can find a different mouthpiece. Now, that might mean you have to, and I've been there. I played on a pine mouthpiece, rest in peace, Jim Pine, for 20 years. And I had to bite to control that mouthpiece. And I didn't even realize I had to bite. Like I had to, when I say bite, I had to put an exceeding amount of jaw pressure onto that mouthpiece to make it sound good. But because I learned to play clarinet like that, I thought that was normal, right? And I played like that a long time. And that's when my teeth started, finally my teeth started, eventually I had to call foul, right? So I had to relearn, and that's exactly what I did. I went to an M13 and I played double lip, and I just had to learn how to play on different equipment. But like my teeth aren't falling out now. So
that's good.
So eventually, like that's my point for all of you, is listen to those pain things and listen to your students' pain things. And if you want, reach out to me. I'm no expert, but I've had a lot of students over the years, and we have fixed these things. I've had students that haven't been able to play for that reason, for hand reasons, for like we can change the equipment. We can make it fit who's ever playing so that it really can be their voice. So let's not accept any pain as acceptable ever. I don't think ever.
So Josh asks, what are some of the most common problems you have seen with articulation?
Here we go, right? It's a big one. Honestly, okay, actually, it's not that hard to answer. Let me put my, the biggest problems with articulation. One, air. I feel like the problem with articulation is air all the time. Problem number two is that students don't understand what part of their tongue needs to go to what part of the reed. And that can be complicated because students' tongues and mouths are all different shapes. So there might need to be some negotiation on that. And three, like some kind of throat tension. But so when I saw something, I think Betty put in about throat tension, and we can talk about that. I think the problem about clarinet, what I realize is there have to be a lot of independence that goes on, right? So lately, actually Meg being one of these people, I'm like, it's possible to leave your tongue high in your mouth. Like our tongue is connected back here, so it's connected to the throat, but you have to be independent. So it's possible to learn to keep your tongue high and forward in your mouth and to let this be relaxed. But you just have to learn how to do that, right? So usually if they can get the air going, get their tongue in a good place in their mouth, like high and forward, get their tongue at the right, like identify where on the tongue to where on the reed, and realize that, now I'm going longer. The other problem is that students, I think, don't understand the action of the tongue actually in the mouth, right? So if you can just clear it up for them, I think a lot of students, myself included, have this impression that the tongue needs to do this in the mouth, right? So if instead you point out to them, okay, pretend my finger's my tongue. In fact, this is exactly what I do. Here's my tongue, my finger's my tongue in my mouth. And I want to have my tongue high and forward in my mouth because it needs to drive the air right into the mouthpiece tip. So if we assume that the tongue, there, can you all, is everybody following? My finger is my tongue. So if we assume that the tongue has to be in this shape in our mouth to drive the air into the mouthpiece tip, then that assumes that the middle of our tongue, like needs to stay fixed. And that assumes that the sides need to stay fixed, right? And then our throat can be nice and relaxed. So if we assume that the tip of the tongue is responsible for articulation, and the middle of the tongue is responsible for voicing, and the back of the tongue is responsible for register changes, then our tongue in our mouth is like this. Like for me, it's like this. This is why Zoom's good because I'm going to just put it right up to the camera and nobody will get grossed out. But like when I'm playing clarinet, this is what my tongue looks like in my mouth, right?
Mhm.
So therefore, it's just a little up and down motion, right? So our tongue really barely, we just start talking on the read, it barely has to move. It's, yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. It's like
Mhm.
that, right? So usually once you explain that, actually, can I call on you? I'm not meaning to put you on the spot, but this is work we've done, right? Can you just say like, what
totally.
was your biggest thing? Like that was it, is once you understood those things, it was like, oh, okay, no big deal, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's definitely a process of like all the elements that you listed. I think it's for me, it was like I just wanted to make sure like I had for articulation, like having the air right first, like thinking about your checklist is something that you say to me all the time. But yeah, like finding ways, learning to like manipulate different parts, like keeping the air going while keeping the tongue forward and high and everything. I hope that's helpful.
Let's do it. And actually there are a few, the other thing is there are a few really good tricks for for air and tonguing, right? One is just a soda straw. So if you have student, like first of all, have them scratch the tip of their tongue, right? And then you just have them, you have to just have them imagine. They get confused sometimes because they're like, well, I don't have a mouthpiece in my mouth. And I'm like, yeah, well, just sort of feel like where it would be. And so it's usually the back of the tongue. So then they blow. And that's the easy one, right? They have to keep feeling air on their hand all the time. So that's a pretty easy one. An even better one, let me get a readout, is the balloon on the barrel trick. This is a really good one. And so what you do for that is stick the balloon on the end of the barrel. And this is a great one too for just support and just for air. I saw everybody getting close to the camera. You're like, what? A balloon on a barrel? And for those of you who don't know this trick, I can't take credit. I learned it from Shannon Orm, who's in the Detroit Symphony when I lived in Michigan. She probably doesn't even know that I learned this from her, but I did because I had a student who went and had a lesson with her and he came back and told me, and I was like, oh, that's genius. So you have the balloon and it's really great. Like you don't even have to make a sound. You're just trying to blow up the balloon. And what it's really great for students to understand what muscles need to be used when they're playing. And it's like, yeah, that's what needs to be happening all the time. Like when you're playing clarinet, you have to be blowing up the balloon all the time. But what's really great is then you have them articulate and they still have to keep the balloon going up while they're articulating whatever passage it is. And probably it becomes evident very quickly that they all stop their air. Like it's just a lack of coordination. Like the minute they start thinking about their tongue, their air kind of goes out the window. And that's pretty common. So yeah, so that's a really great trick to use too. Or for those of you who use breath builder, that's a great one too, is if you use a breath builder and they have to articulate whatever passage it is and keep the ball going up.
Yeah.
So that usually gets the air going. And then they get the air going and then you're like, okay, where is your tongue? Now, when you're doing that, and especially that's why it's nice with the balloon on the barrel, because now you can be like, okay, cool, good job, you blew up the balloon, good job, you did your articulation. Okay, now where is your tongue on the reed? And so then sometimes they'll be like, oh, it was down here, and you're like, okay, cool, do it again and get your tongue up. And then it goes good, and then you can be like, okay, now was your throat, this relates to Betty a little bit, now do you feel tension in your throat, or can you release that tension in your throat while you're doing that and just put the tension down in your core? And usually then they'll be like, oh yeah. And then like, okay, now let's go back to your clarinet and play it. And then almost always it works great. And they're like, oh my God, you're so amazing. I'm like, not really, but thanks. You know, like, glad that worked for you, right?
Yeah.
The other thing, and I would always start articulation, not stop staccato, right? I would always just do legato articulation first, just to get used to where it is on the tongue and get the air and the placement of the tongue going nicely. And then you can introduce the stop staccato after that's pretty secure. And that depends on the student. Some students can, just like everything, just like humans, right? Just like we all are in our clarinet development, some stuff comes easily and some stuff doesn't.
Yeah.
But that's all right, right?
All right. Great. Okay. Moving on. All right. This one says, do you have any experience with bite protectors and do you have any thoughts about them?
Well, I'm totally old school. And my bite protector that I use was because I'm one of those kids that, would go to Allstate in high school. And if you were playing on a number 5 reed, that meant you were tougher. And then you would be like getting blood on the inside of your lip because you'd be doing all the really terrible things you shouldn't do. Yeah. So I know, right? I'm cringing too, but that's like, my teacher at the time, Keith Lemmons, who's retired from the University of New Mexico. Many of you might know Keith, such a great guy. But so he taught me really early on to just fold over cigarette paper. And I have some here I can just show you. So that's the easiest. And so when my students are struggling with this kind of thing, you just get some cigarette paper and you really just like take a couple sheets and you just literally, it's old school, it's cheap, it's easy. And this is my point. I don't need to use this anymore because I don't, but I just like the way it feels on my teeth. Yeah. So I don't see, like, I think you can get this. I think whatever makes your clarinet playing comfortable, do it, right? But you don't want it to be a crutch, right? But I like this just because it's simple, it's easy, it's cheap, you lose them, whatever. I have students who have used various kind of things that are made, and I think, yeah, florist tape, or some people use medical tape, and so I think like no problem. And I think again, if it's you just want to make sure that it's not like if they have to, is it because they're using too much jaw pressure, and is there something that needs to be fixed, right? Is there something that could be made better? Just to are there bad habits that need to be improved or fixed up a little bit, as I think. But otherwise, why not? I think. And sometimes it's good too, because it puts a little more space between the teeth. So if it helps you get the sound, makes the spacing a little better in your jaw, why not? I don't think. But again, if you play double lip, that would show you really quickly. It would show you, because for double lip, it doesn't make as much difference because you really are just doing a lot more with your orbis orbicularis. So when I play double lip, I really don't need this as much, but I like it anyways because it feels nice.
Like a comfort thing. Yeah. Okay. I guess we could move on to Betty's question, which is, how do you get students to stop constricting their throat? I have a couple that audibly constrict their throat during slurs, especially when they are crossing the break. They aren't aware of it most of the time, even when I ask them if they hear the noise they're making. And I can't quite figure out how to make it stop.
Yeah, I hear you, Betty, because I think like if they're not aware of the problem, then how, if you're like, is your throat tense? And they don't know that their throat's tense or not, but you know it's tense. But so I have to give credit to Michael Lowenstern on ear spasm. I imagine most of you know his materials. He has such great stuff. Mm-hmm. And there's a great article or episode he has on ear spasm about that very thing. And he likes to use like bugle calls to get, because you can't really do the bugle calls if the throat is tense. So do you know what I think Betty's on the call. Can you watch Kylie? So bugle calls, you all know what we're talking about with that, is it's doing partial. And actually, I'm not going to put that. I don't know if this read works great or not. So some people use it by blocking the bell, but I don't even do that. I just do where I just, where you just have students do overblowing by changing their throat. So that's a really great one because you can't be tight in your throat and change partials like that. Mm-hmm. Having said that, sometimes that's hard for students to do. So then I have to give credit to Rob Patterson, who's at Boston University. He did a class at North Texas in the fall, and he had students flutter tongue, because you also can't flutter tongue and keep the throat tight. So, right, so that was a good one. But sometimes you don't have kids who can flutter tongue. So then, which was the case of this particular student, so then he had this student sing and play, which is another thing. But actually, it's not so hard, y'all, as you think it is to get them to sing and play. And I think the whole point is all those things force the students to kind of relax in here and keep the air going. So I'm not good at singing and playing. If you all really want me to, I'll try it. But yeah, any of those things, Betty, work. And I think I would, when I've had students, because I understand, but usually those three things, Actually, I have to say, when I would notice that they had tension, the Michael Lowenstern, if you just refer them to ear spasm, his great explanation is great. And if you can kind of do them for, oh yeah, my original sound is off. Sorry, thanks about that, Rob. There, now we go. Okay, if you can teach them to do bugle calls, probably that, I found that took care of it pretty quickly, because that's a premise of Michael Lowenstern, is to do the bugle call thing. So if you can get him to do that, I think that will help you. Because once I saw his podcast and started referring students to it, and I would even do that, I'd be like, oh yeah, you have some throat tension, go watch ear spasm, go watch Michael Lowenstern's thing, and they would, and give it a try, and they would come, it would already be better the next week. So thanks Michael Lowenstern for that.
Yeah.
Right.
He's got so much great stuff.
Yeah, he has a lot of great content.
Okay, so this one says, I am notorious for having, this is from Tiana, I am notorious for having air leaks on the sides of my embouchure, and I am having a hard time trying to get rid of it. What would you suggest I should do to get rid of the air leak?
Air leaks. I'm with you, sister friend. I used to have them too. And I think for me, the problem about air leaks is noticing, is thinking about the causes, right? And probably it has to do something with this muscle. Like I said, it's either the orbis subicularis or the orbicularis oris, but this muscle, this circle muscle right here. And I think what's probably happening is you're not engaging the whole entire circular muscle as efficiently as you could. And that could be because you have a little bit of a smile embouchure, right? That could be because you don't have quite enough space between your back teeth and quite a tall enough triangle, right? Because notice, like, if we were to imagine this Marcellus triangle, Jessica Harry put the link in the chat. But if we go back to Mr. Marcellus's description of, you want to have a dot here on your cheekbone and a dot here on your cheekbone and a dot on your chin, right? So if it's pretty stretched out, then notice there's more space, and then you actually can bring those corners in a lot more, right? Y'all can try it if you want to try it in your, let's get all our little embouchure faces on in the Zoom, right? And I notice, Tiana, if I let it collapse a little bit, what happens? My corners come out, right? So I would say probably you want to go a little taller, and you could just literally think that. You can think of stretching the tip of your triangle. You could think of, if you have a dot on your nose and a dot on your chin, you're just trying to stretch. It could be that you think of stretching and making a little more space between your front teeth, or it could be that you're making a little bigger space for your blueberry in your back teeth. You want to just get more space in there so that you have more space to bring those corners in. And then you want to be really cognizant of developing this whole entire structure so you can hug in and make a cue with those corners. So that might be where you take your straw or your pencil, and I'm gonna throw credit to Don Cinta for this. Don Cinta, who was the professor of saxophone at the University of Michigan for a long time, and one of his students, who is pretty famous now, Tim McAllister, is a good friend of mine. And I can remember one time Tim was walking around. I mean, we were in school about the same time. Tim's younger than I am, but he had a little like piece of tubie like around his neck on a chain, like on a little, and he would just carry it with him all the time, so that whenever he wasn't, and if you knew Tim, this tracks perfectly. He's intent about the saxophone. So whenever he wasn't playing saxophone, he had his tubie there. So he was always making his saxophone embouchure to train these muscles, right? Wow. And so that's what I think probably you want to do too. And if you just think taller, probably you want to do that when you're playing your clarinet in your long tones and your scales, the things that your warm up, like your fundamental stuff. Go taller, and then train these muscles all the time as possible when you're not playing clarinet, so that when you go to your clarinet, it'll be easy to just, and you could, remember, we want this to be mouthpiece shaped, right? Mm-hmm. Not out here. And I think if I had you I'm not going to have you do that, but if we're in my office, I'd be like, make your embouchure for me, and we would work really hard to get this mouthpiece shaped. Mm-hmm. So let's see if those things will help you. Sound good?
Awesome.
I feel like Car Talk. Did you guys watch, any of you know Car Talk? Click and Clack, the Tappet Brothers? I feel like this is like the Tappet Brothers for clarinet.
Great. It's great. I'm loving it. Okay, well, it's actually 12:45. I think we got through all of our questions in the chat. So I guess we're gonna just maybe if we do you want to do one more question or
Yeah, I'm here for like however people want to stay. Like I love the clarinet, right? Like I can keep going all day. So so bring it on. Bring it to me. See if you can stump the
we'll
chump,
do
right?
we'll do one more question. So, okay.
Mahi has 2 questions. I'll take 2 questions. Madeline LeBaron. Tell Madeline hi.
Oh,
Oh, palatial leak. Oh, my friend Juliana's on the call. She's the best. Like, this is, if you had a palatial leak, this is what I would do. Let me get on the email and get with my friend Julianne because she's an expert on that of all degrees. But I'm going to say about the palatial leak, and then Mahi has a, Julian helped me a lot because I had a student during Zoom that all of a sudden, seemingly overnight, had a palatial leak. Bad. And so I asked Julianne, and she has a great article. But what had happened was over Zoom, like, it makes sense, right? This kid's clarinet over time had started leaking and leaking and leaking, like all kind of other things had gone on, and he had allergies, and so he was just putting a lot more air. He just needed to play with a lot more pressure all the time, and I couldn't tell because it was Zoom. You know, it sort of sounded the same to me, and I still feel terrible. But if it's a palatial leak, again, I'm going to refer to Julianne, but I would say make sure there's not too much resistance in the setup, right? So you don't have to blow so hard. So that could be back to the equipment thing. Maybe make sure it's not quite as open or long facing of a mouthpiece. The reeds aren't too hard. The clarinet is not leaking. The clarinet's in good adjustment. And I might punt to Julianne now. It's the pedagogy session, but this is when you know about it, when you know that somebody knows more than you do, then you punt, because that's how it is.
Well, you referenced my article, Kim, and I would point people in that direction first. There are so many things that could be the cause. I see her next question has to do with reed strength. And along with what you were mentioning with equipment, the combination of mouthpiece and reed and having an efficient setup that blows effortlessly, but with a little bit of resistance for you is very much key. And sometimes I see that if people are trying to play too heavy a setup, that they're having to kind of like weight lift to get the clarinet to respond. That can be an issue. That can be a big instigator for the palatal air leak. There's so many things that go into it, tension in the throat and all the things that Kim was mentioning.
Mm-hmm. And that is another thing, just like we have to control the bite. So like, I think we have to make sure there is some amount of bite that's necessary. So it's just a matter of controlling the bite. Well, that's the same for the clarinet. You need some resistance, right? Because you don't want it to be so free blowing, because that can also mean that then you start using your body in ways to create resistance that are not super great, right? So it's a matter of finding what resistance is appropriate. Sometimes kids, they'll want a darker sound, and so they'll get a harder reed and a harder setup because it's darker, but they were biting. Do you know what I mean? So there's just so many factors on the clarinet. But I'm with Julia, and if I have to just start a student on, and even for doctoral students, sometimes I'll just go back to the middle of the road, really. And for me, that's an M15 lyre, or an M15 or an M13 lyre, or a D'Addario XO or X5, because it's just sort of a medium thing. Enables you to kind of reset all the like learning. It's an okay amount of resistance, not too much, not too little. You can control it pretty well with the reed strength. You can shape the mouth, you can shape the oral cavity, you can get the air moving and sort of get the guardrails back to a sort of average place, and then you can go from there, right? Sometimes kids come in with, I have a kid right now, he's adorable, I adore him, but he just wants to fix everything by equipment, and I'm like, no, we're gonna use, we were at TMEA, and so then it's like so much stuff to try, and I'm like, no, you can go to the D'Addario booth and let Kristen Thompson help you, and you can choose one of those, and that's what we're gonna be working with. Like, I kind of was like, nope, we're not going with the fancy stuff, we're not paying $600 for mouthpieces, we're not doing that, because then he's like, oh, and this barrel and this, I'm like, no, right, you gotta learn how to play the clarinet. Like, right? If you have junk equipment and you know how to play the clarinet, it will still sound good, right? The equipment is not, like, you got to learn how to do it, my friend. And he was like, but then, I'm like, nope, We're focusing.
Yeah.
No,
Yes.
embouchure, air. Like, stop. Embouchure and air. That's it, dude. Let's see.
Well,
okay, flutter tonguing.
yeah.
How does it work on well, I'll answer that one really quick.
Sure.
Okay, okay, Mahi, double tonguing and flutter tonguing are different things. Flutter tonguing is it's considered to be an extended technique, but that's a technique whereby you flutter something in your mouth and you're really just fluttering the air. So some people flutter tongue by fluttering the tip of their tongue, like rolling it. I can do that for you. I can't do that on the clarinet, and you'll see why, because when I roll my tongue, it goes to the side. Can you see? It's really weird. So I can't. So I flutter by fluttering my soft palate, right? And then that creates it's that effect. It's more an effect. Double tonguing is where you use the front of your tongue for one syllable in the hard. So you're using the reed and then the hard palate. So it's a digi, 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 or a doo-goo, doo-goo, doo-goo. And I can do that. I don't need to do it very much. And students don't either, because I think if you're relaxed and you're using your tongue in the ways we discussed earlier, if you're using your air really right and you don't have a lot of tongue motion and you're just using the tip of the tongue, probably you can get your single tongue going pretty quickly. Having said that, when I have worked on my double tonguing, it makes my single tonguing better, because you have to have your air in place. You have to have your tongue exactly in the right place. So it's always, I think, good to work on these things because it can help other elements. That was the quick answer for Mahi. But if you want to reach out to me, I'm happy to get into it further. And probably you could actually, honestly, if you went to Ear Spasm, I bet you $10 Michael Lowenstern has something good about that up there. You could probably Google, just Google and see what comes up, what content there is about that stuff. Yeah. Okay.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Levino, thank you so much. We all learned a lot today, I'm sure.
I don't know if you did, but
it was
but I
fun
have to say I'm so flattered for all of you to be here, and I'm super honored. Like, I see all my friends and colleagues, I'm almost brought to tears, because I'm no expert in anything that I learned from really my teachers and from my colleagues, and Meg from my students. So we're all here together. So if you have questions, please reach out. I just been doing it a long time, but I'm no expert, but I've been doing it a long time. That's it. And a lot of students. So like we all have, right?
Yep.
So, okay. Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Jessica and Julianne and Kylie. Thanks so much for having me. Thanks so much to the ICA.
Thank you. This was so fun.
Resource it is for all of us, right?
Yes, thank you.